Hi, welcome back. Have you ever been in a situation where you were feeling great, things were going good, and then somebody said something or something happened that triggered a different feeling inside of you, and all of a sudden you're in a completely different emotional state? If that has happened, you may have experienced emotional trauma in your life. And so today I want to talk about what emotional trauma feels like so that we can recognize it and give you some tools of how to help you when those trauma responses come up. So I had a situation in my life, it was about 2 years ago, where I had one of the biggest traumatic events happen in June in my life. And I was not even fully recovered from that. I was not even back up on my feet. And 2 months later, I had a second huge hit. That was devastating. It was devastating for my business as well. And I was barely learning to stand on my own 2 feet from that when 2 months later, a third trauma hit. That one was very close to my heart. That was very personal and a lot of grief and pain emotionally. I had not gotten over that one when the fourth trauma hit 2 months later in December. And so in the space of 6 or 8 months, I had 4 huge hits, all of which were traumatic, all of which caused me great pain, suffering, anxiety, depression. And finally, I had had enough. And I prayed to God, please help me understand what is going on. Why is all of this happening? Please help me learn my lesson so I do not get hit with trauma number 5. What do you want me to learn? And in that moment, I heard him speak to my heart and say, I need you to learn what trauma is and what it feels like. And so as I got through those experiences and recovered from all of them, I did learn what trauma feels like. And so I want to share, first of all, what can cause trauma in our lives, and then secondly, how that trauma is going to look when it shows up. So trauma can come from a wide variety of situations. You might be in a car accident or be injured in some way. You might have an ongoing stress in your life like bullying or domestic violence. There may be a cause like a death, especially an unexpected death, or a breakup, or even a deeply disappointing experience where you have a lot of energy, emotion, and yourself invested into something when it doesn't work out. That's really traumatic. So trauma can come from a wide range of sources. And what was most powerful to me in those months of my 4 traumas was to recognize what trauma did to me, because not only was I suffering from the pain of the situation, the trauma of the situation and the rippling effect of the consequences, but also every time anything came up that triggered anything remotely similar to one of those situations, the trauma would come all over again. And so first of all, realize the initial trauma isn't the only time you're going to feel trauma. From that point forward, the pathways in the brain that are created that create a natural response to the trauma will flare up again and again and again when you're hit with an emotional trigger. So it's important to realize that if we had a hard situation come up in our life that maybe was scary and we didn't know what was going on, and maybe we heard a strange noise in the house, our mind would start thinking, was that this? Could it have been that? Did my garbage can just tip over? Did a child just walk in the back door? Right? We can be rational and logical and reason our way through the situation. But when it's something that triggers our trauma response in us, there is no time for that dialogue. And that trauma incident, that noise in the house, sends us right back to the original trauma. And physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, there is no time for that dialogue. We are right back on square one as if we were in that trauma moment. And that's an important thing to realize, because we might feel kind of crazy when our emotions and our moods can change so fast. One minute we're fine and things are great, and the next minute we're right back at square one, struggling so much. So just know that these are some of the emotional responses you can start identifying when there is a trigger in your life that stirs up that trauma for you. You may have feelings of shock or denial, maybe disbelief. You may start retracting from people, so you become lonely or feel isolated. There's probably going to be a lot of mental confusion. You have a hard time focusing. You may become angry or irritable for no reason. There could be guilt or shame if that was associated with the traumatic experience. And as you withdraw, you often feel sad or hopeless. So it's a long list of things you can feel. I know when those traumas hit me, I started to recognize I could no longer think straight. When trauma came up or a trauma trigger came up, I did not make any important decisions that day. I did not do any more than I needed to. I had to start stopping and nurturing myself. And that was always the day I wanted to clean the house, just something mindless. But I could be in motion because I didn't want to sit still with those painful feelings. Michelle has shared with me her trauma response, and when she gets triggered, she does the opposite. She wants to go to bed. She doesn't want to feel it. She doesn't want to deal with it. She can't process it, and she curls up in bed. So your response to trauma may be different for every person. There's not one set answer. But physically, just know there are also issues that come up. You may feel insomnia, nightmares. You may struggle with fatigue or get easily startled. You might have difficulty concentrating. Your heartbeat might start racing. It puts you in that fight or flight moment physically. You may even have muscle tension or body aches and pains. So my hope in helping you understand what the symptoms are of trauma or the effects of the emotional trauma coming up, my hope is that you can start identifying it and put the brakes on the trauma response and start to step back out of it before it snowballs and escalates into a full response that oftentimes leaves you kind of debilitated in many ways. So here are some tips. The first thing is to get very grounded. And there's a simple way to do that. You can just put both feet on the floor and imagine that roots are growing from the bottom of your feet way down into Mother Earth. Just let yourself become very grounded in the present moment. And along with that, start doing some mindful breathing. Our breathing and focus on our breathing brings us into the present. So breathe in slowly. Breathe out slowly. When we're in the fight or flight, our breath becomes very shallow because the energy of that oxygen and the deep breathing is preserved so that we can support other body functions. And so when you can breathe deep, even when you're feeling scared or stressed or in trauma, it sends a message to your body that everything's okay and that you can relax. So go ahead and take some deep breaths. And as you breathe, imagine that the breath could even come in and out through the heart, allowing the chest to rise and fall with each breath. That breath is going to help you get grounded in this present moment and truly connect. You'll know in your life if there's anything in your sensory world that makes you feel calm. For me, it's probably milk chocolate. But maybe it's the smell of lavender. You could take a bath with some lavender scent in the bath. Or maybe it's even cuddling up by the fire with a nice book. Maybe it's music. What is it in your sensory experience? Maybe it's touching, wrapping a nice warm blanket around you and feeling the comfort of that. Whatever in your sensory experience can calm you down, bring that in as well. And then the last thing I wanted to share, there's two things, I guess. Allow yourself to feel what you are feeling and honor that trauma. Those things are hard. Trauma is difficult. Allow yourself to feel the fear or the pain or the sadness or grief or anxiousness. Allow those emotions to be present. Many times in trauma, we disconnect. We disconnect from our spirit, from our emotions, from our heart, from our soul. And so in pulling that back and saying, no, I am going to stay connected. I am going to feel what I'm feeling right now, and I'm going to process this. And a simple and beautiful way to do that is just to speak to the consciousness of that trauma. And you can say out loud or in your mind, I see you. I know that you exist. I know you, trauma. I know that you are there. I love you. It's amazing what can happen when we recognize the consciousness of trauma. The trauma starts to fade. Those responses start to soften. And merely by acknowledging it and sensing it and speaking to it, we can have a powerful effect over how our trauma is affecting us. And so I invite you to be present with your trauma. And you can even ask your trauma, what do you need to feel safe right now? What do I need? And is that emotion even happy holding that trauma for you, holding that anxiety for you? Would it want to be something else if it could? If you could release that trauma, would you fill yourself with love? Would you want to feel peace? Would you want to feel calm or full of light? We can invite that trauma to leave. Those trauma responses protect us in the moment. They keep us alive when dangerous, hard, and scary things are happening. But weeks, months, years, decades after the trauma, those trauma responses are no longer serving you. And you can thank them for helping you stay alive and get through the trauma and let them go. Make sure you seek some professional help if you need some more guidance in your trauma. Just know that trauma is real. Trauma is real, and it deserves to be seen and heard. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I'm excited to share with you in our Wholeness Network library, we have a whole section on trauma. Exercises that you can look at, follow along with, tapping exercises, meditations, grounding exercises, things that could really assist you to work through and maneuver through those trauma response moments in your life. I hope this has been helpful. I hope that you'll go to thewholenessnetwork.com and take a look at the library and what we have to offer there. And I look forward to seeing you again. And I hope in this process it has helped you to live life more whole.